On June 6, 1944, the Allied invasion of Normandy was underway, and among the brave units landing that fateful morning was the 5th Battalion, East Yorkshire Regiment, tasked with storming Gold Beach. Their objective: to secure the beachhead, capture the village of La Riviere, and pave the way for further Allied advances inland. Welcome to this video about the 5th Battalion, East Yorkshire Regiment, and their heroic role on D-Day. On June 6, 1944, these brave soldiers were among the first to land on the beaches of Normandy and the first on Gold Beach, facing intense enemy fire as they fought to secure a foothold in Nazi-occupied Europe. Join us as we explore their incredible courage, sacrifice, and the pivotal part they played in the success of Operation Overlord. Before we begin talking about the landing of the 5th Battalion, we must go into detail of the background behind the D-Day landings, the regiment's presence on Gold Beach, and the build-up to that fateful day. D-Day marks one of the most pivotal moments in World War II and history. The landings, officially codenamed Operation Neptune, and the whole invasion of Normandy named Operation Overlord, it was the largest amphibious invasion in history, launching the Allied forces into Nazi-occupied Western Europe. The operation involved meticulous planning and coordination between land, air and sea forces to ensure its success, and over 156,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, supported by thousands of ships, aircraft and paratroopers in an all-out assault to establish a foothold in France. Now, as we look on this map, let's go over the landing zones on that fateful day. The assault would be spread across 5 key beaches, each assigned to different Allied nations. Utah Beach, located on the westernmost flank, and Utah would be assigned to the American forces, specifically the 4th Infantry Division. Despite strong currents pushing the landing craft off course, the troops faced relatively light resistance, securing their objectives with fewer casualties than anticipated. Omaha Beach, the next one along, was another American objective. Omaha presented some of the most fierce fighting of the day. The 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions faced well-entrenched German defenders, rough seas and significant obstacles, and despite heavy losses, they managed to secure the beach after hours of intense combat. Gold Beach, assigned to the British forces, primarily the 50th Northumbrian Infantry Division, Gold Beach saw fierce resistance from German positions, and British troops pushed inland, capturing key villages and linking up with forces landing on the other beaches. Juno Beach, the Canadian forces were tasked with taking Juno, and despite initial challenges including heavy German fortifications and high tides, the Canadians successfully pushed through and advanced further inland than most of the units on that day. And the final beach, the easternmost landing beach, was Sword, assigned to the British forces and some French, notably the 3rd Infantry Division and the Commando Kiefer. Their mission included linking up with airborne troops and advancing towards the city of Caen. Despite stiff resistance, they achieved many of their objectives. And in addition to the beach landings, airborne operations played a crucial role in the invasion's success. Thousands of paratroopers from the American 82nd Airborne Division and the 101st Airborne Division, as well as the British 6th Airborne Division, were dropped behind enemy lines in the early hours of June 6th. Their missions included capturing key bridges such as Lafayette and the infamous Pegasus Bridge, disrupting German reinforcements and securing flanks to protect the beachheads. Each division and unit faced unique challenges, from harsh weather and strong German defences to communication breakdowns and equipment losses. Despite these obstacles, the bravery and determination of the Allied forces turned the tide of the war, making D-Day a decisive step towards the liberation of Europe. Gold Beach would be the middle landing beach, straddling Juno to the east and Omaha to the west, running from La Riviere to Armonche, split into 3 sectors and 6 subsectors from east to west. Item green and red, this sector would not be used for the landings. Jig green and red, the next along, would be reserved for the 231st Infantry Brigade, from Anel to the WN-35 strongpoint in the east. The 231st Brigade would be led by Brigadier Alex Stanier, having A and B Company, the 1st Hampshires, as the main assault wave on Jig Green, supported by B Squadron of the Sherwood Rangers, the 47th Royal Marines, the 2nd Devonshires as a follow-up battalion, and a support team from the 80th Squadron, as well as Avery's and B Squadron of the Westminster Dragoons. On Jig Red, A and B Companies of the 1st Dorsets would be the main assaulting wave, supported by C Squadron of the Sherwood Rangers and 19 Sherman DD tanks. Next along is King Sector, split into red and green, which we'll be focusing on today. The 69th Brigade would be landing here from WN-35 to La Riviere, with the brigade led by Brigadier Fergus Y.C. Knox. King Green was spearheaded by A and D companies of the 6th Green Howards, supported by B Squadron of the 47th Dragoon Guards with 19 Sherman DD tanks, a support team from the 81st Squadron and Avery's from C Squadron of the Westminster Dragoons with their 19 flail tanks. 7th Green Howards would be the reserve battalion. And then on King Red, the 5th East Yorkshires, led by Lieutenant Colonel G.W. White, would be leading the charge with DNA companies supported by C Squadron, 4th 7th Dragoon Guards with 19 Sherman DD tanks, and A Squadron of the 4th 7th Dragoon Guards with 19 Sherman DD tanks also. A Company would land in front of the village of La Riviere, and D Company just to their right, in front of a slipway into the English Channel. Now moving on to the defences. The defences in front of the 5th East Yorks were extensive, with WN-33 dominating the seafront. The defences would include a mortar pit, infantry positions, and as well as a 5cm KWK gun, all supported by a large 88mm casemate next to the slipway, situated to fire down the beach, which the battalion would have issues with upon landing. Further inland, the defences carried on with their foreboding nature, with an anti-tank ditch flowing through the lowland just up from the beach. By the lighthouse, further inland, which will be A Company's objective, there will be a 7.5cm gun, a 5cm KWK, and an extensive defensive area riddled with German machine gun positions. Only a few hundred metres to the west was Worldwarii Battery, an unfinished German battery with 4 105mm field gun howitzers, a range of about 1300 yards with a rate of fire of about 6 to 8 rounds per minute. The weight of the shell was around 22 pounds, which was a substantial weight for a shell of that size, and the guns were in a temporary position along the hedge, but were to be installed in the casemates upon the construction finishing. In the early hours of June 6th, the battery would be targeted by bombers, and then followed up by a naval bombardment from the British cruisers just offshore, the HMS Orion and the HMS Belfast. We now get to that fateful day, the morning of June 6th, D-Day. H hour for the 5th Battalion would be 07:25 hours. The weather was cloudy with a choppy sea. Low cloud prevented the troops from seeing all of the enormous air support that would be provided by the RAF and the US Air Force. The men were awoken at 3:15 in the morning by a réveil, with a bad night's sleep due to the rocking and the rolling the ship suffered during the night of the 5th to 6th of June. Commander H. Wheeler, captain of LSI G67 and chief of the flotilla for Force G, later sent out a letter to Major C.W.S. Bellis of the 5th East Yorkshires, in which he wrote, "We have taken several loads over, but none of them could compare either for fitness or discipline with your assault troops. I must congratulate you and your men on the wonderful show you put up, calling for the utmost bravery and tremendous endurance. Well done." The 69th Brigade's LSIs reached a point of about 6 miles from the coast at around 0500 hours, and the LSIs were then dropped into the rough sea. Force 5 winds from the west tried to push the crafts off course. The objectives of the 5th Battalion were for A Company in front of La Riviere and D Company on the slipway to clear the beaches. B Company were in support of A to go on to the further objective of the village of Versailles. C Company in support of D to the crossroads east of the village of La Riviere. The battalion's run-in was relatively uneventful, drawing only moderate artillery fire as they approached the shore. However, as the first assault wave touched down, chaos erupted. The men jumped out into the water around 4 foot deep and waded the last yards to the shore. A Company faced little resistance after advancing 200 yards to the seawall. Moving to D Company, as they came ashore, they faced heavy small arms fire and mortar fire from the seawall, fronting the Riviere and the machine gun posts in the houses behind. And then at 0745 hours, the report came through that the 2 companies of the 5th East Yorks were ashore and in the right place. One of the Avery tanks upon landing took a direct hit from that same 88mm gun we mentioned previous, detonating all of its demolition charges. The explosion was catastrophic, causing devastating casualties among the left assault company, D Company. 2 of their platoon commanders were killed instantly, and the company's advance stalled under heavy enemy fire. After suffering heavy casualties at the hands of the 88 gun emplacement and 3 tanks being knocked out, a Churchill Avery fitted with a 6-inch petard mortar from the 280th Field Company of the 6th Assault Regiment of the Royal Artillery destroyed the gun, but not before suffering a direct hit, sending hot flying metal fragments all over the beach, causing infantry casualties, including those 2 platoon commanders, Lieutenant W.H.J. McElroy and Lieutenant R. Appleton, and tragically killing all the tank crew. From D Company, the company commander Major K.C. Harrison was wounded, and Captain A. Consett would take over command. Another casualty on that day would be Captain W. Sugarman, wounded for the 3rd time in the war. This success of A Company allowed the Reserve Company B to advance and establish a blocking position to cut off potential German retreats from La Riviere. In the meanwhile, Battalion Headquarters and C Company landed under intense small arms fire. The landing craft ran aground further out than planned, forcing the soldiers to wade through deep water while under fire. The chaos took a heavy toll. Several key personnel, including wireless operators, were killed, and communications broke down entirely. With D Company's commander wounded as they tried to push towards the Riviere, this left the company struggling to make progress. C Company, also in disarray, lost both its commander and second in command, and the leadership then fell to junior officers and NCOs who rallied their men to keep pressing the attack. Under intense enemy fire, British forces coordinated with nearby tanks to suppress German gun nests. Despite setbacks, a platoon from C Company breached the seawall and then advanced into the village. However, the progress was slow and costly. The brigade commander's party, after landing in a jeep, got stuck in a soft, rather peaty part of the beach, but was recovered by a nearby tank and then suffered no ill effects, and once clear of the soft spot, was then driven off. Much of the grass and sand dunes on the beach was burning and giving off a cloud of smoke which obscured part of the shore. By 9:30 am, the brigade commander's party had arrived at the main beach signal station. By this time, the reserve battalion, the 7th Green Howards, had landed and were trying to find a suitable route inland. In the meantime, the brigade major's party, with an M14 control vehicle, had failed to make the shore, the vehicle having been stranded in an underwater shell hole. This was a minor tragedy, as the carrier which disembarked from the LCM had then shed a track on the beach when making for the main beach signal station. Thus, both wireless vehicles for brigade headquarters were out of commission. A miscommunication then added to the confusion. British landing craft support vessels mistakenly shelled the leading platoon, obliterating one section, and after a tense delay, the bombardment ceased and the attack resumed. By mid-morning, the remaining German defenders in the Riviera raised white flags, surrendering to the advancing East Yorks. And by 10 am, the East Yorkshires reported the Worldwarii battery had been captured with 8 casualties, and the battery commander committing suicide with 30 prisoners of war taken. The cost of victory was steep. In taking the Riviera, the 5th East Yorks suffered heavy losses. 2 company commanders wounded, 1 second-in-command killed, 3 platoon commanders killed or mortally wounded, and approximately 100 other ranks killed or wounded. At 10:10 am, the brigade commander, whose jeep had been left on the beach on landing, now left the main beach signal station, with a liaison officer and intelligence officer in his jeep, which had now arrived close to the main beach signal station. And by 10:30 am, 3 hours after the first troops had touched Gold Beach, the Riviera was secured. The bravery and determination of the 5th Battalion contributed significantly to the success of the D-Day landings. Their sacrifice helped pave the way for the liberation of France and the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. After the hard-fought battles for La Riviera and Vesumer, Brigade HQ would be set up in this field here in Vesumer at 11:30 am. The 5th Battalion then regrouped and prepared to continue their advance inland. The battalion had suffered heavy casualties, particularly in C and D companies, each losing approximately 40% of their men, and yet, under the leadership of the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel White, the battalion pressed on. With the remnants of C and D companies now reorganised into one single composite company, the men were ready to move. The task was to follow the 7th Green Howards, clearing scattered German resistance along the way and securing the routes to their next objective, the assembly area near Crepon. The battalion encountered sporadic resistance as they advanced through the countryside. German machine guns and riflemen fired from the cover of tall cornfields, forcing the East Yorks to adopt a methodical approach. Companies deployed in extended formation with tanks providing cover and fire. Advancing like beaters in a game shoot, the soldiers fired from the hip, flushing out and eliminating the enemy. The tanks' baser machine guns and tracer rounds set fire to haystacks and barns, further disorienting the enemy. Some Germans fled, running through the fields, while others fought to the end. One particularly determined machine gunner was literally kicked off his weapon by the second in command of B Company. Villages with German resistance were dealt with swiftly. Artillery fire softened the defences, and companies advanced from multiple directions to secure the area. The battalion's advance was relentless, but not without cost. Early in the afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel White, the commanding officer of the battalion, was mortally wounded by mortar fire while urging B Company forward. Despite this setback, the battalion pushed on, their sights set on the village of St. Gabriel, as the 7th Green Howards and 4th 7th Dragoon Guards captured Crully and the bridge into the town. At 4:45 p.m, Brigade HQ was then established in the village of Villers-le-Sec. At 7:30 p.m, the 5th East Yorks were then held up 300 yards southwest of St. Gabriel by heavy automatic fire from the woods north. The battalion by this time was very tired, and the brigade commander, Brigadier Knox, decided to attack with the 6th Green Howards on the right of the 5th East Yorks, and their objectives would be the houses northwest of the church on the St. Gabriel-Vasseur road. And by nightfall, the 5th East Yorks had successfully taken St. Gabriel, with my grandfather, Captain Naylor, being mentioned in the war diaries as the senior liaison officer relaying the orders from Brigade Command to establish in St. Gabriel for the night. D Company took up positions beyond the village, while battalion headquarters and the other companies secured the area. In a nearby field, which had possibly been used by a German signals unit, the brigade established its headquarters. By then, the local civilians had begun looting the area, scavenging what the Germans had left behind. The night passed quietly, with only occasional enemy aircraft flying low towards the beaches. Ammunition supplies were replenished, and the men prepared for the next day's operations. At the end of D-Day, the battalion were only 3,000 yards short of their objective, the village of Saint-Léger. Early the next morning, a patrol from D Company was then sent on to Saint-Léger. They reported no organised resistance, allowing the battalion to occupy the village without a fight. By noon on D+1, the 5th East Yorks had established a defensive position across the Combayeur road, digging in and preparing for potential counterattacks. The advance inland from Gold Beach was a gruelling but critical part of the Allied effort to secure Normandy. The sacrifices of the 5th Battalion East Yorkshire Regiment ensured that key positions were held and the enemy was pushed back, paving the way for the liberation of France. Their determination and courage under fire remain an enduring testament to the men who fought for freedom on D-Day and beyond. Thank you for watching this tribute to the 5th Battalion East Yorkshire Regiment and their heroic actions during the Normandy landings. If you found this video insightful, please like, share and subscribe to support more content like this, and let's keep their legacy alive by sharing their story. Until next time.